So as you may or may not know, I'm Kurt Bragg. I work for a company called Sandler Training. So we're a professional development firm. We tend to work with executives, mid-level leaders, and frontline staff on really some major issues. Things like, it seems like we have a process for everything but coaching, leadership, and sales. Or, we've had some real bottlenecks in terms of our staff development, those types of things. Our topic today is, it's 2024. What now? What in the world do we do now? What in the world are we doing now? How do we start to maybe make the most out of this new year? One of the things that I think is interesting is that generally in this time of year, people are making a lot of resolutions. So maybe how do we start to turn some of those resolutions into real results? I think the other thing that I hear a lot from people is, Kurt, maybe I had a good year last year. Maybe it was okay. Maybe it was even bad. But how do I get past maybe some of that stuff that's kind of going on between my two ears that's limiting some of my growth? How do I get past that? And then lastly, the thing that we're going to be talking about is how do we start to get more from our meetings, more from our follow-ups, some real tangible stuff. So that's high level kind of what we're going to be hitting on. But let's maybe start to dive in and probably in the last 10 or 15 minutes, but hopefully 10, we could even do like a little bit of lesson learned, like, what resonated with you today? What's a tangible action you might even take today that's going to get you maybe 1% growth, 1%. One of the things I hear a lot from people is, oh my gosh, Kurt, whatever that it is, should be better. I should be better. My team should be better. This situation should be better. And I'm frustrated. I'm annoyed. So how do we start to actually move from that kind of frustration and that annoyance to real growth, I think, unfortunately, God bless my parents. I'm not going to tell them that. But, we all have a particular hand of cards that were dealt, and no one chose their families. But for some of us, we had some of those narratives that have kind of been put in front of us since we were children that, while they're probably really healthy for kids, might not be super healthy for us. For example, don't talk to strangers. Think of how challenging that can be as an adult if you never talk to a stranger, you never go meet anyone at a networking event, you never talk to a prospective client. Great for little kids, not great for us as adults. Children should be seen and not heard. Here's one. Good boys and girls do X. We have these narratives that are running through our lives, and I just wonder how much they may be serving us, or worse, how much are they undergirding some of our natural conversations? For example, don't interrupt important people. Oof, what are we doing? So when we think about, what could be better, I think first thing is to start to look at or reflect on, what is it that, maybe went well last year, but could be better this year, if anything? What maybe went okay last year, but you'd like to see some momentum around? Or what are those one or two things that maybe didn't go the way you valued? For some of us that we heard, some of the folks that have joined us today, we heard that they're starting a new they've got their new business, so they've got a ramp up that they're looking for. So they're looking for some real growth. So what would that real growth mean? What's one area that we might start to look at that? I'll put this up here too. I think here's the tough thing. I think as we think about both from a, what would you call it? A healthy self-respect, but also as we start to engage the broader world, oftentimes we catch ideas, and sometimes those ideas aren't great. And sometimes, I think even worse, sometimes we take on people's negative energy. People will throw stuff at us. Why did you do it this way? Why didn't you do it that way? And I think sometimes we catch it and we hang on to that ball. Sometimes, unfortunately, I think we hold on to those things and we don't let them go. So as we look towards 2024, I think part of it is understanding that millions of ideas come externally and internally towards us every day. The question is what are we allowing to be salient? What are we allowing to actually pique our mind, pique our interest, and keep our focus going? I'll give a small example of this. I was working with a client yesterday, and he was working through some bottlenecks at his company. He's an executive with a large technology company, and he was kind of sharing just some of the challenges that they were having. And one of the interesting things is he must have listed 30 challenges that he was really annoyed by, and that's all he could see. That's all he could see were problem after problem after problem. And so I related to him something that had been shared with me, and it's actually how race car drivers are trained. Let me stop sharing for a quick second. So race car drivers, they're trained how to deal with the skid, how to deal with if they're about to go into a crash. And one of the things that if just your average normal person, if I hit, for example, it's been icy out, if I start to get on that slide, all I can see is the car that I'm about to ram into, and my brain is going crazy like, oh, no, 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 no. The interesting thing about race car drivers is actually they're trained not to look at the wall, not to look at the crash, but instead look to where they want to go. And as they look to where they want to focus their energy and attention, that actually helps their body adjust and move out of those things into the path that they want to go towards. It's a very unintuitive thing. It's very unintuitive. Like, how in the world would we do that? So one of the things I would just encourage as you look for towards 2024 is what are the top 2 or 3 things that are going to be most important? And we're going to talk about like what success looks like here in a second. But maybe what are some of those behaviors that are going to be important for you or your team? What are maybe some of the attitudes? What are potentially some of the techniques that could be supportive as you look in towards the new year? Here's something else I wanted to share. It's a short video, and I think as we start to think of maybe what growth looks like or even what growth is, I thought it might be important to share a little video. Give me 1 second. It's this guy named Jim Rohn. You may not have heard of him. Very, very famous person. But one of the things that I think is very compelling is he talks about how we start to add value in our marketplace and how we actually start to see change. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share this video and maybe take a note or two. What stood out to you as you listen to this? What stands out to you?
Find some ways to multiply your value to the marketplace. And he said your income will immediately start to change. Up until then, I was hoping that the economy would change. I was hoping that my company would change. I was hoping that my paycheck would change. I was hoping that circumstances outside would change. And then here's what I found out. It isn't going to change. So then my question was, if it isn't going to change, how will my life ever change? And here's what my teacher taught me. When you change, everything will change for you. When you get better, everything will get better for you. And that's where I picked up that phrase, for things to change, you've got to change. You don't have to change the marketplace. You don't have to change the marketing plan. You don't have to change the economy. You don't have to change countries. You don't have to change circumstances out there. All you've got to do is look within and see if you can change yourself for the better. And as you change, things will start to change for you.
One of the things that I think is very interesting is a lot of times when I'm speaking to executives or even some mid-tiered leaders, the idea of growth or change is often viewed that there can be a stasis, that, you know, things are kind of going this way, but they don't. In life, things are either going down or up. They're never stable. And so I think for a lot of us, it's going to be really important to just understand what growth, a healthy growth could look like. This obviously it's kind of the beginning of the year still. And January 1st tends to be one of the strongest times of year for like workout facilities and for gyms. I mean, they see a major spike in this season. Everyone's got the New Year resolution. I want to lose 10 pounds, whatever the thing is, right? I'd be curious, does anyone know when the biggest dip is for gyms? When the biggest drop off for gyms is? Does anyone know what that is? Here's the wild reality. It's called Quit Day. It's the second Friday of January. Second Friday of January, people are already quitting their resolutions. Why do you think people, after being so motivated, I'm using a word here, being so motivated to change, to do something different, to have something more than they had before, why do you think it's the second Friday of January that's known as Quit Day? Why are people already changing it up? There's so much inertia or gravitational pull around complacency, around the status quo. And to get away from that gravitational pull, it takes a significant amount of energy. I think of all those rockets that are getting launched from like SpaceX, right? And you see these things, or you see the space shuttle and all this stuff. But once they're in outer space, it's minor tweaks that get tons. But that initial kind of inertia to get out of that status quo takes a lot. And I think the challenge for a lot of us when we're thinking about the new year and goals for our company, for ourselves, for our people, is oftentimes we what would you call it? I think oftentimes we misunderstand how growth occurs. And it actually has an actual term. And so I'm going to share it here. Let me put our screen back up. It's known as the Valley of Disappointment. The Valley of Disappointment. I think for most people, when they think about growth, I think most people expect that growth is just like this. This is the expectation. But growth does not occur that way. Growth actually occurs much more like a J curve, as we continue to build strategies, as we continue to develop healthy techniques, healthy behaviors, and then we start to see just minor growth. This is very true when we go to the gym. The initial feedback loop is horrible. I'm waking up maybe earlier than I wanted to. My muscles hurt. My body aches. I don't feel good. And I go back and look at my weight machine and I go, I haven't changed at all. It's a horrible feedback loop. And I think if we don't have the appropriate vision, we really truncate our actual growth. When we kind of get into that, what you might call the yuck phase of some type of new growth, maybe we're trying to get more prospects for our business. Maybe we're trying to get more sales into our company. When we start to experience some of that yuck phase, what often happens to most people? What do you think happens to most people? What do they do? Unfortunately, people go back up. We go back to that comfort zone. And then the challenge is we can sometimes do it enough to where we start to wire our mindsets to that frustration. And it goes back to some of that head trash, what we would call head trash at Sandler. Some of that head trash that can kind of go on, oh, this type of thing doesn't work. Oh, my people are just different. Our industry is just different. Our business is just different. The challenge is they didn't give themselves enough bandwidth to really get through that breakthrough phase, right? So as you start to kind of jot a few things down and you say, hey, you know what? There's an area of growth I would really like to see around X. Could be professional, could be personal, could be spiritual, but I would like to see growth around X, whatever X looks like. Where would that be? And then do I have enough of a horizon to recognize that it's going to take some real things to develop that? And am I partnering appropriately? So maybe somebody can be a little vulnerable again. We'll share a couple, write down, what is that one thing that could be a little bit different, could be a little bit better? What would that look like in your world? How many of us think everybody else acts in the same manner we do? I'll put up my hand. I used to be that person. I'm like, well, I get it. Why don't they get it? How many times do we deal with this when we're talking about a new client? We go, gosh, this is how our company runs. Why don't they run the same way? People are different. And so what we want to do is, yeah, I think patience is a great one. I think we could even put some strategy around that, some technique around that, so that we get more clarity, less frustration. How do we set up some healthy on-ramps or off-ramps to make sure the process can be as easy as possible? Easy for us, easy for our customers, but then also easy for those other internal teams potentially. So I think first, I think it's going to be valuable to just understand both the learning process as we think about growth. Initially, we got to have some type of awareness. If we don't realize there's a bottleneck, nothing's ever going to change. But I think once we start having some minimal awareness, I think then understanding more intelligently what in the world is actually taking place. Sometimes, and again, I don't think this is what Aiden was describing. I think sometimes the challenge could be is we are sacrificing good for the perfect. Depending on our personality styles, sometimes we're sacrificing the good for the perfect and we're missing it. But maybe the reality is maybe some of those bottlenecks that we've found out, maybe there's some skill gaps. Maybe there's some real skill gaps that either I or my team have. Maybe I've moved into a new role. Maybe I'm working with a different type of clientele, and I need to grow my skills so that I could add more value to the marketplace. I could add more value to my customer base, and as importantly, I can also add value to my internal customers, meaning my team. But just because I'm starting to work the muscles doesn't mean I'm mastering it. Mastery takes time. To be a professional is different than an amateur. And again, as we think about those bandwidths, those bandwidths of growth, I would tell you, there was a ton of research actually done around this. How long, does anyone know how long it takes to form a habit? How long do you think it takes to form a new habit? I would say it's a minimum of 90 days to form a new habit. For some people, it can take as long as 264 days to form a new habit. So as we think about that, and that's just developing the skill, that's not mastering that skill. That's just development of the initial skill. Mastery is much longer. And I think it has the reasoning for this is because as we think about success, it's made up of a few things. It's going to be made up of behavior, attitudes, and techniques. But I think whatever we're going to do, we got to start to get some momentum around it. Because some of these things, they hurt. They make our bodies sore or they make us uncomfortable. So we need to start getting some momentum. And for a lot of folks, what they share is, Kurt, I just need more motivation. I'm like, ooh, you don't. You don't need more motivation. Motivation isn't the key. So let me give you a little bit of insight. I'm going to share something. Give me 1 second. Let me share a little bit of something that I think really helps around this area. As we think about where do we start to get momentum? How do we start to leverage some of the new stuff that we're willing to try? This is Dan Hardy.
So motivation is a tricky thing. It never seems to be there when you need it the most. When it's time to go to the gym, when it's time to work on that big project that's looming over you, when it's time to start writing that book that you've been telling everybody that you're writing, when it's time to make those prospecting calls that make your stomach ache, etc. Everyone thinks that the path to success is motivation or inspiration, then action, and then you get a result. You perpetually hear, you have to start with your why. Visualize your better future. Put pictures on your vision board. Do affirmations in the mirror or whatever. All those things with the purpose of getting yourself motivated and inspired so you'll do the thing that you need to do in order to get the results that you want. But here's the deal, okay? Motivation is fickle, it's unreliable, and it's unpredictable. And even if and when it finally does pay you a visit, it will quickly ghost you. Motivation is fleeting. So if you rely on motivation for action, you're doomed. And it's probably why you don't have the results that you want. You've been waiting for and relying on motivation to take actions necessary to produce your desired results. But here's how motivation actually works and why it beguiles and cheats most people. It's not motivation or inspiration, action, result. It's actually action, result, motivation, and inspiration. Motivation or inspiration comes from seeing results, and results only come from actions taken. We are motivated and inspired when we see the evidence of progress, when we see the results of our actions, which is why we have to act without motivation to actually gain motivation. It's twisted, right? But it's true. That is why Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote in his essay, Compensation, the law of nature is do the thing and you shall have the power.
All right, let me stop it there. Quick takeaway. What did you kind of get from what Darren was just sharing? What stood out to you from what he just shared? How many of us, have that challenging conversation we need to have? Or how many of us are having those prospects we should probably be reaching out to that we could really deeply serve? Or we got that staff member that really, we probably have to have a tough conversation with, and our guts are just feeling horrible and we're waiting for the motivation to come. We're like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to feel great about it. I'm going to deal with it tomorrow. And we get that old tomorrow sorrow. Start with the action. The action will drive those results, which drive the motivation. If we want momentum, drive action. The action will then give us the motivation later. It's a consequence of the action we take. So one of the things I would just encourage you and be supportive to share is, as we're thinking through this, the focal point should be, what are the behaviors we should be addressing, right? What are those behaviors that are going to start to give me some momentum? It could be that I'm reaching out to some new clients. Could be that I'm having some conversations with my team. But what are the behaviors that I have complete control over that I can start to put in to get me the momentum? And then I'm going to get the motivation as a result. Let's keep it moving. So part of this, of course, is, we got to understand, we got to change those beliefs. We're going to do it by this blue button here. As we take action, we start to see the results. Our beliefs will change, which will grow our judgment, which then gives us better actions, which then controls our results, which then gives us stronger belief and provides that motivation. So I think as we start to maybe hit some of the tangible stuff here too, how do we start to get more out of those meetings or some of those follow-ups? Maybe we're putting in some of the action. Maybe we're doing some of the behaviors. How do we make sure we're getting more out of our meetings, either internally or externally? And then how do we have stronger follow-ups? Somebody shared this earlier. Hey, I'm on a particular deadline. How do I make sure that I'm doing what I can to get the clarity I need? So I think when we're telling, unfortunately, or if we are telling, we're going to get low engagement. I think what is the most powerful thing for a leader, or, sadly, I feel like the answer's on the board here, but what's most important for people that are either on business development side, working with clients, or as a leader with their team? Is it telling or asking? And then you can't just say the answer because you know it or because it's on the board, but why would be whatever answer. If it's telling or asking, which has more power, questions or telling? And why? Telling doesn't give us the results we want. It gives us, sometimes we can create compliance, but as a long-term strategy, it's not very strong. It's kind of like if we're always telling our kids something, we get varied results, especially if I'm more motivated or driven about a particular thing. If I want them to do the math homework and Kurt's at a 10 out of 10 to get the math homework done, but my son is like at a 2, I can tell them all day, hey, let's get the math homework done. It's not helping. I need to nurture that relationship forward. And the only way we healthily nurture relationships is by questions. I'm sure somebody may disagree, but I would tell you the power is from the questions. The person that's in control of any situation is the one asking good, healthy questions. So there's some things, there's some elements of ideal questions. The best types of questions is this first one, open-ended ones. Why would open-ended questions be more powerful than close-ended? For a lot of us, this is the last one here. A lot of us have been leading the witness for a long time. Hey, would you like to meet Wednesday, Thursday? Hey, how about 10 o'clock? They see that stuff coming. Hey, I want to talk to you, Betty, on the team. Hey, Betty, I want to talk with you. Hey, how about you meet me at 2 o'clock? Is that okay? When we start to have open-ended questions, it allows our team and our prospects and our customers to paint where they want to paint, to show us the picture they want to show us, not for us to simply take them down the road that we think they should go on. Open-ended are the most powerful because they don't create tight off ramps. And so a part of good open-ended questions are the 5 H's. I put maybe W, but I think the 5 H's. Who, what, where, when, why. Or who, what, yeah. It should be 5 W's and an H. I messed that up. Of those questions, though, here's one of the ones I think, depending upon where you are with a customer or staff member, probably the most powerful one, it's very innocuous, is how. The question of how. How is a very emotionally intelligent question, by the way, very emotionally intelligent. Hey, how do y'all normally go about this? How has this worked in the past? This really affords your clients or your teams to really get much stronger insights and provide that really strong intelligence to you. The thing we don't want to do is come across as critical. So sometimes that's why I was thinking, maybe W, maybe Y. Why, if I ask it incorrectly with the wrong tonality, it's going to read poorly. Lisa, why are you doing it this way? Harold, why have y'all been doing this on the team? It doesn't read well. So if I ever ask that question, why, can come across critical, I might want to give a little bit of a buffer statement before I do it. And then lastly, I was going to say, hey, don't be leading the witness. Hey, could we go ahead and get together tomorrow at 3? Hey, have you been having this challenge, that challenge? Hey, everybody else loves this. Don't lead the witness. Let them tell you. Let them tell you what they're most concerned by. Let them direct you to the things that they most care about. You may deal with 10 topic areas in your world. Maybe they don't care about all 10. And while you may think it's great, who cares what you think? It's what they care about that matters, what they're willing to do. So for example, because my family had some restaurants, we may have 3 or 4 bestsellers. If somebody's new coming in, I'm really curious about what they're most interested by, what's really driving them. Hey, fajitas have been really delicious. Everyone's loving that. It's like, well, wait a minute, I'm a chicken guy. Let me get some chicken. I was thinking about this. Let them help you. They're going to tell you if you let them. The other thing that I would watch for is wishy-washy words. What could be a wishy-washy word? What does that mean? What's a wishy-washy word? You ever ask your kids this, hey, how are things going? Good. What does good mean? I don't know what good means. So we want to be watching I don't necessarily care if you use some wishy-washy words, but I tell you, if you're working with clients or you're working with a team, you want to get rid of those wishy-washy words and ask for clarity. The other thing is people really hate buzzwords. Sometimes we use them to show that we're competent. What I would tell you is oftentimes actually that creates more confusion for customers, and worse, if they don't know the buzzword you use, that jargon you use, that acronym that you use, they're probably not going to correct you and say, hey, you know what? I don't know what that is. Stay away from that. The other thing that I would just say is, what are some mirroring things that you can do as you're listening to your people? Are they using some words that you want to pick up on, some emotionally laden words? Hey, Kurt, I'm really frustrated by this thing over here. I might go, oh, you're frustrated about, yeah, tell me a little more about that. What's been frustrating about it for you? So we want to match and mirror. And then we want to listen to those emotionally laden words. Most people are willing to take action based on challenge, like 80%. 80% of people will take action to fix a problem. Only 20% of people are willing to take action to get some type of positive outcome. So are we listening for their frustrations? Are we listening for their challenge healthily? If we have a team member, are we listening to what they're worried about, what they're concerned with? The last thing I would say here is, we want to be careful because it's not about me, it's about the we. And so we need to be careful about the old me monster. We want to be careful about the me monster. And what I mean when I say me monster is when it's all about me, 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 me. Hey, I want to get together. Hey, I think we should have a team meeting. Hey, here's my agenda. That's all about me. That's not about the we. We want to create mutually beneficial relationships and add greater value to those. So just be aware of that. Hey, I'd love to schedule a meeting and tell you all the great things that we do, how much smarter, faster, better we are than Joe and Betty down the street, and how much better our kids are. Nobody wants to hear that. They don't care about that stuff. They care about their stuff. And so the one I did use a little jargony word. I was hoping somebody would call me out, but I put it here. UFC is not a fight. This is known as an upfront contract. Upfront contracts, brains love these little mini upfront contracts. Hey, could we talk about X? Hey, would you be open to discussing Y? Today, we actually had a nice little upfront contract where we said, hey, here's kind of what we're going to cover. Here's kind of the order which we'll cover it, and here's kind of how we're going to wrap up. Brains love that. It also takes the temperature down in the room so that people aren't as worried when they kind of know where the path is going to lead. The last one I put on here is, hey, you know what? You can't manage anything you can't control. That's the reality. A lot of us try to, I forget who it was from earlier, but someone had shared, might have been Alicia, had shared, hey, Kurt, are you asking about the greater world? What I might change about that? It's like, well, we don't have any control over the greater world, but what do we have control over in our world? Might have control over that phone call I need to make to a colleague. Might have control over that prospect I should reach out to. Might have noticed on my PeopleLinx info that, hey, this person was showing some interest, just hasn't reached out yet. I could make that telephone call, right? Those are things I can actually manage. I can't manage if they're going to pick it up. I can't manage if they're going to respond to my email. So I want to just manage the stuff I can control. I'm wishing you a really, really strong 2024. And then love to read y'all's lessons learned as you shared them. Hey, have a beautiful day. Best of luck, everybody.